I'm gonna go ahead and guess that Samsung is much larger than most people realize. When I hear that name, I instantly think of cell phones, specifically the Samsung Galaxy. It's probably the case for most people watching this. I'm sure many of you actually own one of them. Right now, you may be looking at a picture of a Samsung Galaxy on your Samsung Galaxy. Alright, I'm complicating this, but they've been selling hundreds of millions of them every year, more than any other company. It appears that they did lose that #1 spot in the middle of 2020, but then quickly regained it right back the next quarter. So here's my challenge for the day. To help prove that Samsung is bigger than you know, I'm going to talk about Samsung for the next 10 minutes or so without even mentioning the thing for which they are most known. Simply put, that was the last time in this video you will hear the word smartphone. Alright, Samsung Electronics has consistently been ranked by Fortune as one of the largest companies in the world. Their sales have been around $200 billion each year, which sounds crazy when I say it. They're from South Korea, and for the entire country, their GDP is something like 1.6 trillion, meaning this one company accounts for an eighth of that. And as if that wasn't crazy enough, Samsung Electronics is only one part of the much bigger Samsung Group. When you combine it all together, they've been responsible for as much as 20% of Korea's GDP. Let me know if there is one, but I'm not aware of any other country where their economy is so reliant on one company. So let's talk about everything that's going on here. Samsung goes all the way back to 1938 and actually existed for over 30 years before it had anything to do with electronics. It was started by Lee Byung-chul when he was 28 years old. Their initial logo featured 3 stars because stars are meant to last a long time, and it was meant to be symbolic of the predicted longevity of the business. The name Samsung is actually Korean for 3 stars that were featured on all their logos up until the 1990s. That initial business actually operated as a dry goods store that would also trade groceries internationally. He would buy noodles and fish and vegetables from the growers and producers around the area and sell them to China. It all proved to be successful. The Korean War made things more difficult, but when it ended in 1953, he took advantage of the opportunity and expanded into all of these other industries. First, it was commodities, when he built a sugar refinery that happened to be the first of its kind that was built in the country after the war. Following that was textiles, when he opened the largest woolen mill in the country. After that, it was insurance, a TV station, a department store. For these first 30 years, they seemed to be involved in everything except electronics. I mean, they were already generating over $100 million in annual revenue before what became Samsung Electronics Company even existed. In 1969, it was created as one of the many parts of their business. In the early 1970s, they put out this black and white television as their first product, and by the end of the decade, they were the world's #1 producer of them. I know, everything's happening so fast, and to try to explain how Samsung became so successful so fast, I think the best explanation would be chaebols. That is a Korean word that is defined as a family-controlled industrial conglomerate in South Korea. Samsung fits that definition perfectly because they are the biggest one. See, following the Korean War, the country's economy was in some trouble. They weren't producing much, and they definitely weren't exporting much. Then in 1963, there was this new president named Park Chung-hee who was very set on expanding this economy. His main method of doing it was to try to centralize everything. I'm oversimplifying it, but he essentially wanted to take the bigger businesses and help make them bigger. The idea is simple enough. If the companies grow, so does their economy. Now, Samsung, already being one of these larger businesses, was tremendously helped by this intervention. The Korean government would help Samsung. They would be providing them loans under favorable terms, giving them special tax breaks, just a lot of things that would ensure that they would have money to keep investing and growing their business. They would even go so far as to limit their competition. For example, in the 1970s, they said Japan can no longer sell consumer electronics in Korea. Obviously, taking those alternatives off the market pushed the consumers towards Samsung. Later in that decade, when they started making semiconductors, the Korean government said that they would only allow international companies to enter their market if they handed over some of their technology secrets to Samsung. To me anyway, this is not exactly the inspirational story that we typically see on this channel, but we can't deny that the methods were successful in growing Samsung and the Korean economy in general, but it may not have been the best way to do it. Like I said, the country is now very reliant on one company. If stuff started to go bad over at Samsung, I hate to see what would happen to the rest of the country. Also, if you're looking to start a small business, I do not recommend Korea. The laws are obviously not in your favor. Given that they've had such an unusual yet strong push forward, it makes sense that they would have grown into one of the largest companies in the world. So I want to show exactly how big they are by taking a look at some of their bigger, more impressive parts. Samsung Electronics is the core of their business, and it consists of 4 separate divisions. The first one there is consumer electronics. They make televisions, monitors, refrigerators, air conditioners, any stuff that you have in your home that you bought from Samsung probably falls under this segment. They've actually been the world's largest maker of televisions for over a decade now, so if you own a TV, there's a 1 in 5 chance that it came from Samsung. The next segment would be information technology and mobile communications, which is most known for their laptops and something else that I promise not to mention. The third segment is device solutions, which has to do with memory and displays. Actually, Samsung has made quite a few of the displays and chips that have gone into iPhones over the years, so there you go. Even if you buy an iPhone, Samsung is making money from it. The final division under Samsung Electronics is Harman. It's a company that they bought in 2017 for $8 billion that deals mostly with connected car systems and things like that. It was actually their biggest ever acquisition, which really means something when it comes to Samsung. Alright, that covers the electronics, but there are still some major things that I've yet to mention. Samsung Heavy Industries. They started shortly after the electronics in 1974 and, believe it or not, specialize in making ships. Over the last almost 50 years, they've built over 1,200 of them. I'm talking about massive drill ships, carriers, tankers, even cruise ships. On top of that, they also make these big cranes, and they used to make forklifts. Given that the average person is not buying ships or really even encountering them too often, this is probably a part of Samsung that you didn't know about. I have more. How about the Samsung Foundation? This is a non-profit portion of the company that owns and operates a hospital in Seoul, South Korea called Samsung Medical Center. I'm just guessing that most people are unaware that there is a Samsung Medical Center. That just sounds strange to me. I guess to go along with that, I should also mention that Samsung is also closely tied to a university in Korea as far as major funding and sponsorships. Another big one would be Samsung Construction and Trading. This right here, to me anyway, may be the most unexpected part. Mainly a construction company that makes buildings and infrastructure. They've helped make some sizable bridges, tunnels, roads, power plants all around the world. They even build skyscrapers. It's in a big way too. After I say this, you're probably going to want to leave and double check it, but believe me when I say it, the tallest building in the world was actually built by Samsung. That was in 2010, and to go even a step further, the building that it passed, the one that was the tallest building before that, was also built in part by Samsung. I'll admit that this one is hard to follow, but there is still more. This one no longer exists, but it's definitely worth mentioning. Samsung Aerospace. In the 1980s, they manufactured jet engines and helicopters, and later went on to make fighter jets and tanks for the Korean military. They also had major deals in place to supply parts to the world's largest airplane manufacturer, which of course was Boeing. Considering Samsung Aerospace has not existed since the 1990s, I won't say too much more about it. I just thought that you should know Samsung did in fact produce military vehicles. Okay, the final thing I want to highlight is Samsung Life Insurance. Do you remember when I said they started providing insurance in the 1950s? Well, that has since evolved into Samsung Life Insurance. As the name implies, they provide life and health insurance, but again, it's in a big way. This company alone, Samsung Life Insurance, without all the other stuff I mentioned, makes almost $30 billion a year, and because of that, consistently ranks on Fortune's list of the world's 500 largest companies. You know, I think it'll really drive this home if I summarize all of this by listing out all the things that I've mentioned in this video that Samsung either currently provides or has provided in the past. To make it fun, I'm going to try to do it in one breath, so here we go. Groceries, sugar, textiles, insurance, a TV station, a department store, television, semiconductors, monitors, refrigerators, air conditioners, laptops, CPU chips, displays, connected car systems, ships, cranes, forklifts, a medical center, a university, bridges, tunnels, roads, power plants, skyscrapers, helicopters, jets, and tanks. And, you know, the other thing that took 4 tries, by the way. And all of that is just the stuff that I've selected that I felt would be more significant or unexpected. There's also things like washing machines. They used to make commercial vehicles. They own a theme park. They have a multi-billion-dollar IT company. It's too overwhelming. Do you know how big a company has to be to where all of this stuff doesn't even make the main list? I'm out of breath. I'm just gonna end it here.